Hi, Billy Goodnick here, your host of Garden Wise, Santa Barbara's favorite place to learn about sustainable landscaping. We've got a really interesting show coming up. We're talking about a great tree that we grow here in town, also some important shrubs for your garden, and of course, irrigation tips from Kathy Perret. For the last few episodes, we've been interviewing local landscape designers, having them show us their projects so we could learn more about their design process and demystify it for all of you. Today I'm going to talk with Joan Bolton, owner of Santa Barbara Garden Design, and we're going to look at this dysfunctional front yard garden she took on that was just drinking way too much water. She's turned it into a beautiful oasis. Let's go see. Hi, this is a segment we've been doing regularly, introducing you to local designers and helping you understand why it might be in your benefit to hire a professional rather than just run to the nursery and load your car full of plants. So, Joan, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Billy.
Could you give everyone some idea of what this was when you started, what the client was after, and why you got involved with the project?
Okay, well, I got involved because they called me,
Yeah.
which is always a good thing. We started out with this charming San Roque, really cute bungalow, very quintessential Santa Barbara cottage. And so what they wanted to do was create an inviting entrance, a new place for people to park along the street. Parking can be tied along the street. Yeah. And so we wanted to create new parking areas, have a nice grand entrance, and they wanted low maintenance plants, they wanted color, they wanted the birds, bees, butterflies, beneficial insects, created an inviting environment not only for their guests and themselves, but also for nature. And they also wanted to capture the rainwater off their roof, take it down through the downspouts into the dry creek.
Which wasn't here.
Which was, no, nothing was here. This was just grass with a giant play structure and a pepper tree out front.
So it wasn't going to make the cover of Home and Garden quite yet.
Only as a before.
Okay, that's great. Well, good. So how did they find you? How did things get rolling?
Typically the way somebody gets hold of me is either by calling me or more often now from email. They'll just send me a brief email and say, hey, I'm interested in landscape design. And so what I typically do is email them back and say, I'd love to talk with you on the phone first and provide your phone number, or here are some times for me to call. And then we talk on the phone, kind of assess where they are. And then I come out and do a meet and greet, and there's no charge for that. And that generally takes about an hour, and we just walk around the property and kick around some ideas and see what they have in mind. From there I prepare a proposal that lists all of the tasks that I'm going to do for them, starting with the different planning sessions. We have an initial planning session where we really get down to the nuts and bolts. I come back and I measure the space. Then I prepare a base plan. And if we're doing hardscape, which is any sort of, well, this yard has a lot of hardscape with the walls, the dry creek, the walkways, the new porch. I do a preliminary hardscape plan first, and we meet to discuss that. So that's our second planning session. Once we've figured out where everything's going to go with the hardscape, and I include trees because they're major structural elements. I include those with the hardscape as well. Once we have those dialed in, then I prepare a preliminary planting plan, come back for the third planning session to go over the preliminary plants. We kick the tires on all those. I always bring photos of all of the plants so they see.
So you've gone through the design process, all of these stages sneaking up on the design. What's the final deliverable? What does somebody get when they hire Joan for your design services?
They get a set of plans.
Okay.
They're scale drawings. I work in quarter scale, which is an easy scale to interpret and an easy scale to install. And so that comes after they've approved all the plants, they've approved all the changes to the hardscape. And what I like to do is, if they've already chosen a contractor, when I bring the final plans, and I work in color, which is kind of fun. I don't know if everybody else works in color anymore, or ever did, but all my plans are in color. And so I think that's a really good, because a plan is a method of communication my job is not to create pretty plans. My job is to create a beautiful garden.
Right.
And so the plan is the blueprint for making that happen. And the easier the plan is to read and the easier the plan is to interpret with as much detail as possible, that I think leads to a more successful bidding process and a more successful installation.
So I understand from you that the only way to the front door here used to be just from the driveway and then along the porch. So guests and the homeowners had to get there that way. This is completely different. What did you do and how'd you get here?
It is. They wanted to create a new entrance, so we created this gracious stone entrance, integrating both the white posts and whatnot of the white wood of the house with the new beautiful Santa Barbara sandstone. We're walking over, and this is at least 5 or 6 feet wide, which is a nice as you can tell, we're walking 2 by 2.
Yeah.
It's a nice width for a main walkway to the front door. We just traveled over a bridge, which is over a dry creek. We connected the rain gutters and the downspouts from the house into the dry creek, and it actually flows. The water actually flows when it rains, and then the water afterward, sinks into the ground and returns back to earth, which is a really nice thing. We also, the Cecil Bruner roses were on an old beat-up white picket fence. And we laid the roses down, removed the fence, and then put in the new white post and rail fence instead.
It's beautifully detailed. I love the finial and
yeah.
And not to use a vernacular phrase, but you didn't cheap out. Those posts have a nice presence to them. There's some beef.
They're beefy. They're beefy posts, yeah. And then when we got to the curb, for the cars, we wanted to make sure that there was room for the car door to swing. So we did the decomposed granite for the first 3 feet, so people can easily exit from their cars and then walk up this entrance to the house.
Excellent. Good starting point. I just want to point out Joan's mastery. She even accessorized by matching the paving material to the cat. A lot of designers don't think of that sort of thing. So I noticed that here you've got this beautifully done flagstone, and then we branch out to decomposed granite with this border. How do you get to that? Why isn't it all flagstone or all decomposed granite?
Well, coming from the main entrance, you want a smooth, flat surface. Whether you're walking barefoot or whether you're in high heels.
Only on weekends, yes.
Anyway, it's nice to have a smooth, flat surface to the front door. The other thing about decomposed granite is it can kick in your heels, in your soles, and you don't want to track it into the house. And it's a nice natural thing. The flagstone is a little more formal, and the decomposed granite gives you a sense that you're starting to wander. So that's
you're in the garden here, you're in the entrance.
Exactly, yeah, right. And that's another sort of a design, a subtle design that a designer can bring to it, is working on those transitions and working on the flow in terms of where you actually want to, what sort of emotion or sense you want to evoke in the garden as you're traveling through it.
Got it.
So we've got a very smooth flagstone that's a nice entrance coming up. So
and I'm noticing you're mortared between the joints here. Not everyone does that. So there's this sense of having something green in there. This seems a lot more practical. Yeah,
it's more practical, it's more stable, it's going to last longer, and it just provides that clean finish all the way up.
There's some beautiful little seats over there. Let's go have a seat in the shade.
All right.
So in this wonderful cozy little room, table for 2, and I'm enjoying where it's sitting here. We're under a little bit of canopy and we've got some nice views. So what was this? Did the client ask for it? Your idea? And how does it work?
Okay, well, I always like to include at least one seating area in every design I do, whether it's a front yard, backyard, side yard. It's a nice focal point, and it's a great place to sit. In this case, we're looking up the creek to the bridge to the water feature in the distance, shaded by the canopy of the olive tree, which is a really beautiful thing. But it's just, this is a nice walkable neighborhood, so you can be neighborly. You're on the other side of the fence, but you can wave to the neighbors so they can stop and chat.
Kind of semi-private.
Semi-private, exactly. They also have another seating area up on the porch, but I'm not sure they use that as much as sitting out here. And the other thing I like about having a seating area is it engages my clients in their gardens. They're not just walking through to the front door or to the back door. They're not just going to the barbecue. If you put a seating area out in the garden, suddenly there's a different appreciation for the plants and just being in that moment and developing an emotional connection to your garden that I don't think you get when you're always just looking out a window.
So in my experience working with clients, I sometimes have clients who know their plants. They even can pronounce their botanical names.
Yes.
And there's others who just don't know where to start. They just, they're a blank slate. So could you give me a little about how you work with savvy clients versus the ones who just need all of your help?
Okay. I kind of approach both of them the same way. at the outset at least. We sit down at that first planning session, once they've hired me, we sit down at that first planning session and I just have them look at a whole bunch of photos, just a quick hit, not an analyzing, but do you like this, do you like that, do you like this, do you like that, and why? My interest is always in delivering water conserving gardens. My target is to only water every 2 weeks. You know,
once the garden's established.
Once the garden's established, right. Exactly. And so that's a sort of a fundamental thing to my approach to design is colorful water conserving gardens. Then for the folks who already have a strong sense of like, I like, you know, this palette set of plants or like this or that must-haves, I still sit them down because we can organize plants so many different ways. You know, I've had collectors' gardens where people come in and they just need to be organized.
Absolutely.
You know, it's almost like looking at a messy closet where it's a big mess and they kind of know it, but they're not sure what to do about it.
So you're about rounding things up. If there's one of this here, one of this here, let's put them together so they're
right.
They're in a grouping or they make sense balancing each other.
Or we take, okay, you really have that element of spiky stuff. Let's actually add some spiky stuff over here to balance it out.
Double down on it.
Double down on it, yeah. Exactly. To provide that continuity
so,
and cohesion.
One other thing, often we're asked to work on a garden that already has its bones and a lot of the plants are doing fine.
Yes.
And you need to make that life or death decision. Who's going to the compost pile? Who are you keeping? And how do you play with what's already there? Any thoughts on how you work with an established garden that just needs some lipstick?
You know, that's a tough one. Soil prep is so important to me in terms of adding a lot of good organic material to get the little microorganisms in the soil jump-started so that they can glom onto the roots of plants and do positive things for the plants. That if there's a way with established plants to pull them out, redo all of the soil, and redo the grading in case there's any drainage issues that need to have, and then put the plants back.
That's ideal.
I really like to be able to start with a bigger blank slate, and I've gotten a little tougher with my clients like that over the years too.
That's great. I'm with Jonathan, sitting here on this beautiful front porch, looking out at the garden, and just wondering, how did you get to the point where you said, you know, we need a professional designer, and then how you ended up with Joan?
Well, in the front of our property was just basically lawn. There was no fence. There was no pathway coming up. We had some ideas about how we wanted to have a beautiful front facing to the street. And the only way to get into our house was to come up the driveway and then, you know, go along here and in. So we had a whole lot of ideas about wanting to be more water-wise and more beautiful and have a, you know, just a gorgeous entry to our property.
Well, you achieved that. Were you real familiar with plants, or was it kind of...
I would say I'm probably more familiar than most people with plants, just because I've been a gardener for years and my mother was a green thumb. But I'd say over half of the plants that we have here came, you know, directly from Joan's bringing them to our awareness and showing us pictures of how they would look and how they would blend with other colorations in our front yard.
So I think this is a great place to wrap things up. Thank you so much for being in this segment. We're at the headwaters of this beautiful riverbed here. Whitewater rafting on the weekends, I guess.
Exactly.
Yes. Tell me a little bit about the fountain, how it got here, your idea, client's idea. It's just this beautiful piece of work.
Well, what we wanted to do, we needed some sort of headwaters thing to start. We knew we were going to have the dry creek, but you can't just start with some rocks. And so we wanted a focal point, and we talked about whether we wanted to do some big boulders, but we wanted to have water all the time. And what's nice about this fountain is it's self-contained. It just recirculates right in this bowl. So you're not losing a lot of water. And I think they run it pretty much 24/7. And it provides a lovely background sound when you're walking up to the garden and walking up to the front
value?
door. Habitat value, it's good for bees.
God, you've got the shallow water, so they can just dip in at the edge.
Good for the birds, and yeah, and it's just a lovely focal point. It's a very natural finish on it too, so it worked out really well. It was just the right size, and they purchased it in time so that we could do the stonework around it.
Oh, wonderful!
And really nestle it in.
Thank you so much for your time. This is
Thank you.
Beautiful. Love your garden. Love what you're doing and your approach to it. So. I hope that helps you all make some decisions about when and where to work with a professional designer, the advantages of that. And thanks very much for joining us on this segment. Was that a fabulous garden or what? Thank you, Joan. And to learn more about Joan's work or to contact her, go to santabarbaragardens.com. Next segment, what tree is that? Bill Spiewak is going to share one of his favorite trees with us. Hope you enjoy. Meanwhile, I got to go pick up some shrubs for our next segment. Seatbelts.
What tree is that? What tree is that? Ah, what tree is that? What tree is that?
Hi, I'm Bill Spiewak, a consulting arborist here in Santa Barbara. I've been in the horticulture industry for more than 40 years now. And right now we're on Torreon Drive in San Roque. I'm here because there's two trees that are absolutely spectacular. They're called Deodar Cedars, and they are extremely stately trees. I find that these provide so much maturity to this community, and they've always been a favorite of mine. I've seen them in a lot of other locations. San Roque, though, really is dated by these trees because they're quite old and quite exquisite. What's nice about these is they're a nice central leader. When you look at the trees, they have one trunk that goes straight up, and some of them, as they mature, actually will develop multiple tops. Sometimes the trees are actually topped, but these trees have a needle. They're in the pine family. All the pines in the Pinaceae family have needle leaves. They're what we call monoecious. That means one house. In other words, they have male flowers and female flowers on the same tree. In the fall, we generally get the male flowers, which are very heavy in pollen. If you're an allergy sufferer, not the best for you. If you watch the winds in the fall around a lot of cedar trees, you'll see gusts of yellow pollen flying through the air. And then they have a real pretty cone that is more apparent in the spring, early spring. But one thing you'll notice on these trees, if you look closely, is that they have two types of shoots. They have little short shoots that grow along the tops of the stems, and then they have long shoots, which is these longer stems that just continue to elongate. Okay, I just want to point out here, I mentioned short shoots and long shoots, and several species of trees have long shoots and short shoots. But what I'm referring to is these little shoots over here are what they call determinate. They only grow to a certain length, whereas the long shoot extends this direction and will continue to grow further out. So it has both kinds of shoots. All shoots are required to photosynthesize, or all shoots do photosynthesize, and therefore the short shoots that are on the inside are worthy of retaining because not only do they help feed the plant, but they also add to the nice character that it has. I highly do not recommend removing these short shoots. What often happens with trees during drought is they get somewhat stressed and their immune system weakens. As a result, they get attacked by pests and diseases that will often cause either their decline or just severe stress. When we look at this tree, we can see it's not as lush, it's thinner, more open, definitely could use some tender loving care. So I believe water is the key here, not overwatering, but adding enough water to service the large root system. So I want to take this opportunity to show you a couple of different perspectives on the same species, Deodar Cedar. We're in San Roque Gardens, which is a little area by the golf course, by municipal golf course. And I have a couple of cedars here that I particularly like, and they're a bit different. This one behind me, you can see is different in shape. The top was removed at one point in time, and thus the lower branches right under where it was topped end up growing out laterally. Thus we get more of a rounded shape. So here we have another tree opposite the one that we just looked at. This is typical in its form. This one is about 50 feet tall, and you can see it maintains its conical shape. On this tree, the homeowner had raised the lower branches so they get a little more light to their window, opens it up a little more. My opinion is that I prefer trees with really low branches that weep, but everybody has their own personal opinion. Yet you can see that this tree is doing a nice job providing some beauty to the front of this house, as well as some morning shade. These two trees we just looked at are probably about 50 years old or 60 years old, quite a bit younger than the trees we looked at earlier on. But all the same, genus and species, slightly different forms, all fairly healthy and doing a great job in our urban forest. So the Deodar cedar is one that I recommend if you like a conifer, a tree with cones and needles, I think it's a great, majestic front yard tree for many applications.
Gotta find the right vine. Something great. Ah! We heard it through the grapevine. Bad pun. Okay, you're coming with me. Thank you very much. Stay right there. Want to thank Bill Spiewak for showing us the Deodar cedar. If you want to see those up close and personal on Cannon Drive, right near Las Positas and State Street. Cannon Drive is lined with them and they're just beautiful. That's it for this segment. We'll be right back.
Water wisely. It's simple. Visit waterwisesb.org. Let's save together.
When the weather changes, do you know how much water your plants need? For landscaping text alerts, subscribe to the county-wide free message service. You'll receive weekly texts with a water percent adjust recommendation to help you conserve water and save money by reducing your watering during cooler weeks. You'll also be notified about upcoming WaterWise classes. A typical seasonal or monthly adjustment isn't precise enough, so you may be overwatering and wasting money. A weekly adjustment is better for the health of your landscape, and it's so simple. Just look for the Seasonal Adjust, Water Budget, or Percent feature on your irrigation controller. And finally reduce the percentage based on the recommendation for that week. To sign up for weekly landscape alerts, text WaterWise to 855-510-0241.
Be the solution to water pollution and stop pollution at its source. From the people to the street, to the creeks, to the beach. From the people to the street, to the creeks, to the beach. From the people to the street, to the creeks, to the beach.
From the people to the street, to the creeks, to the beach. From the people to the street, to the creeks, to the beach. From the people to the street, to the creeks, to the beach. From the people to the street, to the creeks, to the beach. From the people to the street, to the creeks, to the beach.
We're all the solution to water pollution.
Hey, welcome back. I'm in the big shrub section at San Marcos Growers. I know on a personal level you probably don't have anything to hide, but that doesn't mean that you always want to be on full display, like when you're in your garden moving around or with family, or you're sitting in your living room looking out the window. We don't need to be seen all the time, or maybe there's a view you just don't want to look at, passing traffic. That's where screening shrubs come in, and I'm going to show you my top 10. It's the screening shrub guy. Come and get your screening shrubs. Come on, boys and girls. Screening shrub delivery guy. Screening shrub delivery guy coming in. Come and get your screening shrubs, all shapes and sizes. So after that treacherous drive, now it's time to talk about screening plants. Got quite a few here to go through with you and tell you the virtues of these plants, how and why you might use them. But first, let's talk about what we mean by screening. As a designer, when I think of screening, it's about having something between me and something I don't want to look at or I don't want to be seen by somebody else. So let's get some terms straight here. As a designer, I think in terms of screening plants that are informal versus hedges. A hedge is something that needs to be clipped and pruned, and we're usually seeing them as just a big block, just a wall somewhere between you and what you don't want to look at. Those don't require a lot of space if you're willing to prune them and if the plant is willing to be pruned. Another thing to consider, and this is going to require you to do some research or have a reliable nursery employee help guide you, is the appropriateness of your plant for the type of soil you have. Some places in the Santa Barbara area have wonderful soil. It drains beautifully. Other people are stuck with adobe and rocks and things like that. Not every plant is going to be happy, if I might anthropomorphize, in any type of soil. There's some that can grow anywhere. I've grown a few in belly button lint. Kidding, disclaimer, no belly button lint. Another thing is the amount of sun or shade that a plant will take. In a brand new garden, everything's sunny, unless you're right against the north back side of the house. But over time, the trees that you plant are going to cast shade, and some plants that thrived in full sun might start looking a little bit weaker. The last thing we want with a screening plant is for it to start giving up and not doing its job as the garden matures. So if you want privacy between you and the neighbor, and you put in a plant that requires full sun all the time and it starts getting shady, guess what? You're going to have to be very good friends with your neighbor. So think about soil, think about how much water the plant's going to take, think about how much sun and shade and just general intensive care a plant might need. Everything I'm going to share with you today are pretty darn tough plants or they wouldn't be on my list. This is a royal trumpet vine, a plant called Disticus rivers. And it is a vine. I know I've been talking about shrubs and bushy plants, but surprise, surprise, if you've got a wall or a fence, especially like a chain link fence, which is not that pretty to begin with, and you not only want to hide the fence, but also create some density, then as long as the fence is high enough to be above eye level, or the plant is capable of growing unsupported for some of its growth, then you can go with vines. Trumpet vine grows in sun or even a decent amount of shade, but you'll get more flowers if it's sunny. It takes low water once it's been established. That might be a couple of years, but if you have it on a drip irrigation system, and a quick tip, don't just put the drip emitter right over the container when it's first planted. Allow for, over the next few years, to move the drippers away so that the root system expands. And stylistically, you know, you can see this isn't going to be in your cactus and succulent style garden generally. This is in a more traditional type of garden with pastel colors. It'll bloom starting in about spring and go through summer. So I put some new plants here on the table, and I want to talk about one design idea before I get in too deep on the specific plants. Prepare to be underwhelmed when it comes to screening plants. They're generally in the background, and from a design point of view, they don't need to be the center of attention. An example I think of is like a Broadway musical, something like Hamilton, or going back years to something like Guys and Dolls. There might be 30 people on the stage, and then there's your lead actors who are the center of attention. They've got the spotlight on them. Same sort of thing for background plants. I would much rather choose a plant that does its job, has staying power, and doesn't require a lot from me, even if it's not particularly spectacular, and then let this be the backdrop for the other guys that are putting on the show in front. So you're looking at a lot of just plain green plants. Some of them have flowers, but that's not why I choose these plants as background plants. It's because they're gonna take a licking and keep on kicking. First one up, this is Ligustrum japonicum, and there's a few offshoots of this. There's another one makes my brain hurt. Ligustrum japonicum texanum, and how we got Texas and Japan together, I don't know. But you'll notice this is a plant whose natural character is to grow upright and vertical. That's a good thing for screening plants because we know they're not going to be creeping out into the garden and requiring a lot more work. It's also dense. It'll keep its foliage throughout, sun or shade, and super low water once it's established. It does have the bonus of clusters of small white flowers in the springtime and early summer. They are fragrant or they are stinky. It depends who you are. Some people love them. I had them outside my bedroom window when I was a kid. I was fine with them. Some people are a little turned off for them. So if you are going to shop for ligustrum, try to find it when it's in flower, or just put it somewhere where it's not going to be in your face if you think it might be a problem. So this is ligustrum or privet. This is another one of my favorites. Again, very vertical growth. You can see it almost does it all by itself. This is a plant called Myrica californica, or Pacific wax myrtle. Guess what? It's from California, so this is a native plant. Also does great along the seashore if you're close to the water. Some plants might get a little mildewy if they're too far into the fog belt. This one does great, and by comparison, it's a much lighter green foliage, finer texture, small leaves. Very nice plant and makes a great backdrop for whatever's around it. And again, another green plant, but a green plant with some interesting characteristics to it. The common name is cohuhu, and I think it's something South Pacific language. I couldn't tell you which one. It's a form of pittosporum. We have a lot of different pittosporum or pittosporum growing in our area. They do great. This is a form of Pittosporum eugenoides, and one of the cool things on this is a little bit brighter foliage color on the new growth, but it also has these almost jet black stems, so puts on a little bit of a show. Stay right there. Hi, I'm back. What you been doing? This is another Pittosporum tenuifolium. This one's called Marjorie Shannon. I've got these in my front yard. And every time I come home, I'm singing "Take My Breath Away." It's these beautiful, creamy, milky variegation along the edges, and it's even more of a stark contrast because you've got the dark stems with the light outside. It'll grow in full sun. I think it looks best when it gets full sun in the morning and a little bit of protection in the afternoon. It'll also use less water if you use it that way. So these two Pittosporum are great. Again, vertical type of growth. I'll be right back. This is another one of my favorites. It takes clipping really well as long as you do it right, and it doesn't always come with a half-inch stake in it. This is just how we grow them at the nursery. It's called African fern pine. It is from Africa. It's not related to ferns. It's not related to pines. It just kind of gets that name. Goes by two different botanical names, Afrocarpus or Podocarpus. You'll most commonly find it under Podocarpus. What I like about it, of course, the delicate texture, light green color, again, sun or shade. However, you want to stay ahead of this plant. There's a specimen of this at Alameda Park that's probably 100 feet tall and 80 feet across. It's on the west side near Mitchell-Terrena Street if you want to go say hello to it. But treated as a shrub and kept to size in your garden, it'll do fine pretty much forever. Now, I said that a lot of these shrubby plants aren't necessarily spectacular, but here's a few that are the exception. As an informal screen, this is not a plant that's going to like a lot of shearing, but this is Leucadendron Safari Sunset, called Safari Coneflower. It's a sort of a flower cone type structure in the center, but what's really special about it are these reddish burgundy colored tips and burgundy colored stems. It takes a little bit of pruning to keep it denser, can become almost a small tree, but it makes a very nice screen, especially in Mediterranean style gardens. This is from South Africa and blends really nicely with some succulents and a lot of our other Mediterranean plants. This is always high on my list. This is another African plant. This is called African boxwood, and it's very much like boxwood but unrelated. It's Myrsine africana. And what I really love about this is, again, the stems, aside from the nice crispy leaves and the vertical growth, the stems are a burgundy color. You put this in the garden with some other plants around it that have some trace of burgundy or red, and it's a very harmonious plant to have in the garden. Love using this guy. Not one of the taller ones, so if all you're looking for is a shrub that's going to get above eye level, this is a really good candidate. And staying in those sultry type of colors, you'll see this around in a lot of situations. This is purple hopseed bush, Dodonaea viscosa purpurea, or is it atropurpurea? There's something down here right now that'll give you the right name for it. That's what we do. Great plant, grows, it can grow as much as 12 or 15 feet tall, but again, takes to pruning very well. Don't shear it, leave this as an informal plant. Too much shearing, it'll start dying off on the inside. Very, very low water. One thing to look out for in an over-irrigated garden, which I hope you don't have, this might start to reseed. If it does, you just pull the seedlings out when they're little babies. They're so easy to spot because of this color. So Dodonaea, fabulous plant, and a plant that just keeps on giving. This is pineapple guava. Recently changed its name from Feijoa to Aca. It's Aca Soloiana or Feijoa Soloiana. Great personality. I said that some of these screening plants are kind of boring and dark green. This is one of the exceptions. It's a kind of a gray green or sage green on the top, and these cool kind of a blue-gray on the underside. The bonus, of course, it gets flowers that have red stamens like a bottle brush, and then it produces what I think are really delicious fruits, which are pineapple guava. You'll get less fruit if you're growing it as a shrub because you're pruning it more, but if you let it turn loose and turn it into a tree, great plant, very delicious. And one more super goofy plant, recently introduced to me. This is a succulent. It's called, this one is called Giant Elephant Food. So if you're looking for ways to attract elephants to your garden, because we're all interested in, helping with habitat, and you just want a pet around the house, this is it. I'm going to guess it's called elephant food because it's so succulent and filled with water like jade plants and things like that, that the elephants just love munching on it. It's like some of the other plants. It's got these kind of maroon colored stems, and its botanical name is Portulacaria afra macrophylla. Macro meaning big, phylla meaning leaf. And this can get 8–10 feet tall, and if you want to reproduce it, you just snap it off like a lot of succulents, stick it in a pot for a little while, roots, off it goes into the garden. One other screening plant. If you intend to just lie on your belly in the garden all the time and never pick your head up any higher than this is a great plant for screening. I am pushing your foot. Those are some of my top picks for plants for screening. Remember, we're choosing plants primarily. First consideration is, will it be happy in this location? We're certainly concerned with water, sunlight, soil, whether they attract pests. None of these are known pest attractors, whether they help support habitat. So we're looking for plants that fit in our sustainability model. We're looking for plants that'll be more upright growing and not require a lot of pruning if we don't want to do that. And we're looking for plants that complement the style of our garden. I hope you got something from this. Come on back. So that's my top 10-ish. I think I lost count. 10 to choose from may not be enough for you, so if you want to look at more screening shrubs or any other type of plant, go to waterwisesb.org, go to the database, and you'll see hundreds and hundreds of plants and searchable criteria so you can find just the one for you. One note about San Marcos growers, they are a wholesale nursery, so you're not going to be able to get in here unless you come with your landscaper or gardener, or send them ahead, or you can order these plants through your local independent nursery. They can order from San Marcos and get them to you. Next up, a very deep subject. We're talking about deep watering. Now, when you've got a small plant or a plant in a container, it's very easy to know that you've gotten the entire root ball wet. Very important for your plants to grow. Kathy Perret is going to tell us how to do that when the plants are in the ground. It's all about deep watering.
Hi, I'm Kathy Perret. I'm with the City of Santa Barbara's Water Conservation. Today we're going to talk about that term all gardeners have heard but not everyone understands. Water deeply to make your plants healthier. What does watering deeply mean? How does it affect the plants? And as a gardener, how do we know if we've actually reached the root zones and we've filled it up for the plant and so that they can be healthy and water-wise and more drought tolerant? Let's take a look here. This is just a plant we want to get rid of, but it's doing really, really well. I want to see how deep down the roots are. One of the things I want to show you here is adding organic matter keeps the soil so nice and moist. This is mulch. It's a good 3 to 4 inches deep. And as we go down here, I want to see how deep the roots to this plant go. They do grow horizontally because it's a weed. They're very opportunistic. They're going to go wherever there's moisture and nutrients. So let's see what we got here. This is a great example of what deep, at least 8 inches, infrequent. This garden is low water using, water-wise plants. They get watered about every 5 days, and they have 3 to 4 inches of mulch, keeping the soil cool and reducing the evaporation so that we're getting the biggest benefit of the water that's being added to the plants. Think about the plant and its root zone as a gas tank. If you have 8 inches of roots, so this bucket is 8 inches. This plant has 8 inches of root structure. If I were to fill this all the way up with water and then leave it for multiple days, the plant is going to be able to absorb the water and the nutrients that are stored in the gas tank. It's going to evaporate some water off the surface. Pretty close to, in a week's time, it's going to evaporate almost an inch of water. So then, after that time frame, you can come back in, you refill the gas tank. You don't want to overfill it, it runs off the property. You don't want to water it too long at that point because it's going to go, if you water more than that, it's going to go beyond the root zones and the plant's not going to be able to use the water. That's the reason why we're watering deeply and how the plants actually get much more advantage from the nutrients in the water you apply. If we were to look at this gas tank and you're only watering on the surface, your gas tank is tiny. You can only allow your plants about 40% of evaporation and water use before you start seeing stress. The next step is how do we create deeper roots? How do we get a big gas tank that can feed this plant, that can provide the moisture that's necessary and extend the life of our garden with more efficient application of water and it easier for the gardener? You're not out there every single day. Let's talk about a couple of steps that we can do to try and train our plants to grow a nice deep root structure. Whether you're a longtime gardener or a brand new person putting in your new babies into the landscape, you can start to try and train the roots of your plants to grow deeply, to look for that moisture, to build the biggest gas tank possible. One of the things to think about is in the spring, after we've had some rain, the soil is saturated. Now is the time to let the soil dry a little bit on the surface. Let it go down 2 inches before you add water. Don't just automatically start watering 3 days a week or every other day. If you do that, the soil will start to dry out. The plants will never be motivated to grow deeper and look for moisture, and what you end up with is a plant that in our low water conditions, or if you have an irrigation break, it suffers. In fact, it could die in less than a week with no water. So as you're watering, make sure that you water deep enough. This is going to require that you kind of get involved, get your hands dirty. What I'm going to have you do is water for enough time, and depends on your soil. If you have clay soil, you may need to water very slowly. And even you may need to water maybe 20 minutes and then wait an hour and then come back and water another 20 minutes. Clay soil doesn't absorb water very fast, but it holds water for a long time. If you happen to live where the soil is sandy, you have another challenge. That water just goes straight through. So you don't want to water for 20 minutes at a time because you're going to water beyond the root zone. You can amend those soils, organic matter, adding mulch. Over the years, you're going to have some beautiful loam soil and your plants are going to thank you. So let's go back. We've watered it now. We've waited an hour after we've watered. We're going to move the soil. We're going to use a small trowel or a shovel or a soil probe, and we're going to see how deep the moisture is. These plants don't need much water, but I'm 8 inches down. I'll pull up the dirt. It's cool. It's not very wet, but it is moist, which means that the mulch that's on here is holding the moisture in under this plant. It's hard to show you. You kind of have to get your hands on it. You can squeeze it, you can feel it. If it's cool, if it's moist, and then you can break it up, that's really nice soil. This has got a lot of mulch. Over the years, it's had a lot of organic matter. This garden gets watered once a week. Right now, it's towards the end of its watering cycle, but you're not seeing any stress on the plant because it has a really deep gas tank. It's got deep roots. It's not stressing. We're going to refill that up with some water the next time it irrigates and let it do its thing and enjoy its blossoms. Thanks for spending time in the garden with me today. And I hope that we were able to explain what water deeply actually means, and that you can take this home and you can do it in your own garden. If it's the middle of summer, you're going to want to start slowly for your plants if they've been being watered every day or every other day. Stretch it out. As you get to 3 days out, increase the time because you know you're going to need to put that water in there, and check where the water is. Get your hands dirty. Feel the soil, feel the life. Enjoy your garden. Thanks so much for joining us today, and if you have any questions at all, please visit waterwisesb.org.
Well, big thanks to Kathy. Hope you learned something you can use in your own garden. So that does it for this episode, and if you've missed any in the past, go to waterwisesb.org. All the episodes are there, all the way back to when Owen, Dell, and I were the silly garden wise guys. So thank you again, and be water wise, Santa Barbara County. I got to get this thing moving. Get your motor running.